February 19th, 1945, 03:27 hours, Iwo Jima. Lieutenant Colonel Takechi Nishi, Japan's most celebrated cavalry officer and Olympic equestrian champion, crouched in a concrete bunker overlooking the volcanic beaches where American Marines were establishing their beachhead. Through his field glasses, he watched thousands of enemy soldiers moving inland with mechanical precision, their equipment unloading in endless streams from landing craft. What Nishi couldn't see, what no Japanese commander truly understood, was that scattered across the Pacific, American artillery officers were about to demonstrate a mathematical revolution in warfare that would render centuries of military doctrine obsolete. At precisely 0400 hours, radio calls went out across multiple fire direction centers. Fire mission, time on target, coordinates, Terre George, 347521, 24 batteries, HE delay. Stand by for synchronization. In caves and tunnels across Iwo Jima, Japanese soldiers prepared for what they believed would be another traditional artillery barrage, survivable through deep fortification and disciplined endurance. Instead, they were about to experience the most devastating innovation in artillery warfare since the invention of gunpowder. Within minutes, 288 shells would arrive simultaneously in a mathematical symphony of destruction that would revolutionize how armies die. The mathematics were elegant in their lethality. Time on target, or TOT, represented the culmination of American industrial precision applied to the ancient art of artillery. Instead of firing sequential salvos that allowed enemies to take cover, TOT calculated the exact flight time of shells from different distances and fired them in sequence so they would all impact within a window of 10 to 15 seconds. The psychological and physical effects were devastating beyond anything Japanese military science had prepared for. The development of time on target had begun not in war colleges, but in the mathematics departments of American universities. Colonel Harold R. Bull, working with the Army Artillery School at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, had recognized that modern artillery's effectiveness was limited by traditional firing methods. Sequential battery fires gave enemies time to seek cover between salvos. The solution required precise calculation of flight times, weather effects, and firing sequences, a mathematical challenge that American artillery officers embraced with scientific enthusiasm. By 1943, American artillery doctrine had been revolutionized. Fire direction centers, equipped with plotting boards, slide rules, and telephone networks, could coordinate fires from dozens of batteries scattered across miles of terrain. Each battery calculated firing data independently, then synchronized their salvos to achieve simultaneous impact. The Japanese, masters of infiltration and surprise attack, had never faced artillery that could respond with such mathematical precision and overwhelming volume.
General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, commanding the defense of Iwo Jima, had studied American tactics extensively. His defensive plan anticipated sustained bombardments that his forces could endure through deep tunneling and dispersed positions. Japanese military doctrine emphasized spiritual strength over material superiority, teaching soldiers to survive bombardments through discipline and superior morale. What Kuribayashi couldn't anticipate was American artillery that eliminated the time factor entirely, creating instantaneous bombardments of unprecedented intensity.
The first massive TOT barrage of the Iwo Jima campaign began at 0630 hours on February 19th. 36 artillery batteries, positioned on ships offshore and established positions, fired 432 shells, timed to impact within 12 seconds. The coordination required split-second timing across multiple platforms, with naval gunfire, field artillery, and mortars, all contributing to the synchronized destruction. Japanese defenders who had survived conventional bombardments for hours were obliterated in seconds. Lieutenant Yoshitaka Hori, staff officer for Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, recorded in his diary the impossible reality of American artillery. The enemy bombardment does not begin and build like our doctrine teaches. It arrives all at once, like thunder from clear sky. No warning, no time to take cover. Our men are simply gone. The Americans have weaponized mathematics itself. The technical achievement behind TOT represented American industrial warfare at its pinnacle. Fire direction centers used mechanical computers, precise meteorological data, and extensive firing tables to calculate the exact moment each battery should fire. Weather balloons provided wind data at multiple altitudes. Survey teams established precise coordinates for both friendly and enemy positions. Communications networks connected observers to fire direction centers, to batteries with telephone lines, radio nets, and even primitive radar systems. Each TOT mission required coordination that would have been impossible for pre-war armies. Battery commanders received firing orders specifying not just targets and ammunition types, but exact firing times calculated to the second. Forward observers called for fire and provided immediate damage assessment. Communications personnel maintained contact between units, separated by miles of hostile terrain. The entire system represented industrial organization applied to battlefield destruction. Japanese artillery doctrine, based on European experience from World War I, emphasized accuracy over volume and individual battery effectiveness over mass fires. Japanese artillery officers were trained marksmen who took pride in precise shooting with limited ammunition.
This philosophy proved catastrophically inadequate against American mass fire techniques that substituted mathematical precision and overwhelming volume for individual accuracy. The mathematical principles behind TOT seemed simple but required extraordinary precision to execute. Artillery shells followed ballistic trajectories determined by muzzle velocity, elevation angle, and atmospheric conditions. By calculating flight times for shells from different distances, fire direction officers could determine the exact firing sequence needed for simultaneous impact. Batteries closer to the target fired later, while distant batteries fired first, with timing calculated to split-second accuracy.
Colonel Charles P. Summerall, Jr., commanding the 13th Field Artillery Brigade on Iwo Jima, described the TOT technique. We transformed artillery from a weapon of sequential destruction to one of instantaneous annihilation. The Japanese prepared for bombardments that built gradually. We gave them mathematical precision that eliminated time itself as a defensive factor. The psychological impact of TOT barrages proved as devastating as their physical effects. Japanese soldiers trained to endure prolonged bombardments found their mental preparation useless against instantaneous destruction. Traditional defensive techniques, seeking cover when artillery fired, became impossible when hundreds of shells arrived without warning. Survivors reported complete disorientation and the breakdown of unit cohesion after TOT attacks. American artillery observers, watching through field glasses and periscopes, documented the effectiveness of TOT fires with clinical precision. After-action reports noted that Japanese positions that survived hours of conventional bombardment were completely destroyed by 30-second TOT barrages. The mathematical revolution in artillery had made traditional fortification techniques obsolete overnight. The industrial requirements for effective TOT operations revealed American material superiority over Japanese forces. Each TOT mission consumed ammunition at rates that would have exhausted Japanese supplies within days. American logistics systems delivered shells by the thousands, maintaining supply rates that enabled continuous TOT fires. Japanese artillery, restricted by limited ammunition supplies, couldn't respond with equivalent volume even if they possessed the coordination capabilities. Production statistics told the story of American artillery dominance. In 1944, American factories produced 23.6 million artillery shells of all calibers. Japanese production peaked at approximately 1.2 million shells annually, including all sizes from mortars to heavy coastal guns. This 20-to-1 disparity in shell production meant that Americans could fire more ammunition in major TOT barrages than Japanese forces received for entire campaigns. The 105mm howitzer, backbone of American divisional artillery, exemplified the industrial approach to warfare. Standardized, mass-produced, and supported by abundant ammunition supplies, the M2A1 howitzer enabled TOT fires that Japanese artillery couldn't match. Each American infantry division deployed 54 of these weapons, more artillery than entire Japanese armies possessed. When concentrated for TOT fires, American divisional artillery alone could deliver devastating bombardments. Japanese defensive positions on Iwo Jima had been constructed based on experience from previous island campaigns. Deep tunnels, reinforced bunkers, and dispersed ammunition storage reflected lessons learned from Guadalcanal, Saipan, and other battles. These positions could withstand conventional bombardments lasting hours or even days. TOT barrages, lasting seconds, but delivering equivalent destruction, rendered months of construction effort useless. The speed of TOT destruction eliminated the Japanese defensive advantage of depth. Traditional artillery doctrine allowed defenders to fall back through successive positions as bombardments progressed. TOT fires destroyed entire defensive zones simultaneously, preventing tactical withdrawal and isolating surviving units. Japanese commanders found their carefully planned defensive schemes collapsing within minutes of American artillery concentration. Forward observers directing TOT fires possessed capabilities that Japanese artillery had never developed. American observers carried radio equipment, detailed maps, and specialized training in target identification and damage assessment. They could call for fire from multiple battalions and receive immediate response through well-developed communications networks. Japanese artillery, limited by equipment shortages and communication difficulties, couldn't achieve comparable coordination. The mathematics of destruction reached their peak during the assault on Mount Suribachi, Iwo Jima's most heavily fortified position. American artillery officers calculated TOT fires from 47 different batteries, including naval guns, field artillery, and heavy mortars. The bombardment delivered 564 shells in 18 seconds, creating destruction equivalent to a sustained barrage lasting several hours. Japanese positions that had survived 3 days of conventional bombardment were obliterated in less than half a minute. General Kuribayashi's final radio message to Tokyo reflected the hopelessness of facing American TOT tactics. The enemy's artillery coordination exceeds our worst predictions. They destroy in seconds what our engineers built over months. Our defensive positions provide no protection against their mathematical precision. This is not warfare as we understand it, but applied science in service of destruction. The innovation of TOT techniques spread rapidly through American artillery units in the Pacific. Artillery schools established specialized courses in TOT coordination, training officers in the mathematical principles and communication procedures required for effective mass fires. By 1945, every American artillery battalion possessed the capability to participate in coordinated TOT missions, multiplying the destruction available to ground commanders. Japanese prisoners of war, when questioned about American artillery effectiveness, consistently cited TOT barrages as the most demoralizing aspect of facing American forces. Veteran soldiers who had survived conventional bombardments described feelings of helplessness when facing artillery that allowed no time for defensive action. The mathematical precision of American artillery had transformed the psychological landscape of warfare. The logistical achievement supporting continuous TOT operations staggered Japanese intelligence officers who studied captured American documents. Supply calculations showed that American forces on Iwo Jima expended more artillery ammunition in single TOT missions than Japanese forces received for entire months of operations. This disparity reflected not just industrial capacity, but fundamental differences in military philosophy between nations. Technical manuals captured from American artillery units revealed the sophistication of TOT procedures. Detailed firing tables provided ballistic data for every combination of range, charge, and weather conditions. Communication protocols specified exact procedures for coordinating fires between units. Quality control standards ensured that ammunition performed to specifications required for precise timing. Japanese artillery, lacking such systematic approaches, couldn't achieve comparable effectiveness. The Weather Service supporting American artillery operations provided meteorological data that Japanese forces could never match. Balloon-borne instruments measured wind speed and direction at multiple altitudes. Temperature and humidity readings enabled precise ballistic calculations. Atmospheric pressure data improved accuracy for long-range fires. This scientific approach to artillery support multiplied the effectiveness of American TOT techniques. Survey teams established the precise coordinate systems that made TOT possible. Using advanced optical instruments and mathematical techniques, American survey parties created firing charts accurate to within meters across entire battle areas. Japanese forces, lacking equivalent survey capabilities, relied on map coordinates that often proved inaccurate for precision artillery work. This technical disadvantage prevented effective counter-battery fire even when ammunition was available. Communications networks supporting TOT operations represented technological achievements that Japanese forces couldn't duplicate. Telephone lines provided secure communications between fire direction centers and batteries. Radio nets enabled coordination with forward observers and naval gunfire support. Signal Corps units maintained these networks despite enemy action, ensuring that TOT fires could be delivered when needed. Japanese communications, vulnerable to American electronic warfare and lacking redundancy, frequently failed under combat conditions. The mathematical revolution represented by TOT techniques transformed not just artillery effectiveness, but the entire nature of defensive warfare. Traditional fortifications, designed to protect against sequential fires, became death traps when facing simultaneous bombardment. Japanese engineering expertise, accumulated through decades of military construction, proved obsolete against American mathematical precision. Colonel Ikeda Masuo, chief engineer for Japanese forces on Iwo Jima, documented the failure of traditional defensive engineering in his technical reports. American artillery coordination makes depth of fortification irrelevant. Our deepest bunkers provide no more protection than surface trenches when hundreds of shells arrive simultaneously. Engineering principles developed over centuries prove useless against mathematical warfare. The industrial scale of American TOT operations reflected production capabilities that Japanese war planners had consistently underestimated. Shell production rates, artillery manufacturing, and ammunition transport systems all operated at levels that enabled sustained mathematical warfare. Japanese industrial capacity, strained by years of conflict and strategic bombing, couldn't support comparable artillery operations, even if tactical knowledge existed. Training programs that produced American artillery officers capable of TOT coordination represented educational achievements that Japanese military schools never approached. Mathematics courses, engineering training, and practical exercises in ballistic computation created officers who understood artillery as applied science rather than traditional gunnery. Japanese artillery training, emphasizing courage and accuracy over mathematical precision, produced officers unprepared for coordinated mass fires. The development of specialized equipment for TOT operations demonstrated American technological innovation under combat pressure. Mechanical computers calculated firing data faster than manual methods. Improved communication equipment enabled coordination between distant units. Enhanced survey instruments provided the accuracy required for precise timing. Japanese forces, lacking access to such equipment, couldn't develop equivalent capabilities regardless of tactical understanding. Integration of air and ground observations multiplied the effectiveness of American TOT techniques. Artillery spotting aircraft provided target identification and damage assessment that Japanese forces couldn't match. Aerial photography revealed defensive positions with detail impossible from ground observation. Forward air controllers coordinated close support with artillery fires, creating combined arms effectiveness that Japanese defenders had never faced. The precision manufacturing required for effective TOT ammunition reflected American industrial quality that Japanese production couldn't equal. Shell weights, powder charges, and fuse timing all required consistency measured in percentages rather than the tolerances acceptable for conventional ammunition. American quality control systems ensured that TOT ammunition performed to specifications required for mathematical warfare. The psychological preparation of American artillery crews for TOT operations included training that Japanese forces never developed. Gun crews practiced synchronized firing until the procedures became automatic. Fire direction personnel rehearsed complex calculations under simulated combat conditions. Communications operators learned to maintain contact despite enemy interference. This systematic preparation enabled effective TOT operations under combat stress. Japanese attempts to develop counter-tactics against American TOT techniques failed due to fundamental limitations in equipment and training. Without comparable survey capabilities, Japanese artillery couldn't achieve the accuracy required for effective counter-battery fire. Limited ammunition supplies prevented sustained operations against American fire direction centers. Poor communications hindered coordination of the few assets available for counter-artillery missions. The ultimate demonstration of TOT effectiveness came during the final Japanese counterattack on Iwo Jima. General Kuribayashi's last offensive, planned as a traditional human wave assault, was met with the largest TOT barrage of the Pacific War. 68 artillery batteries, coordinated through multiple fire direction centers, delivered 816 shells in 22 seconds. The attack that was intended to prove Japanese spiritual superiority was obliterated by American mathematical precision before it could develop. Sergeant Yukio Maeda, one of the few survivors of the final counterattack, later described the encounter with American TOT artillery. "We charged forward with the spirit of the samurai, ready to die for the emperor. Then the entire world exploded simultaneously. Not gradual bombardment like we expected, but instant death from every direction. The Americans had turned mathematics into the ultimate weapon." The mathematical revolution that began with TOT techniques transformed artillery from a weapon of attrition to one of decisive engagement. Japanese defensive doctrine, based on surviving bombardments through endurance and depth, became obsolete when faced with instantaneous destruction. American artillery officers had weaponized precision and transformed warfare into applied mathematics. The development of time-on-target techniques represented a fundamental shift in American military thinking that Japanese commanders never fully grasped. Where traditional artillery doctrine emphasized maximum effect on target through sustained fires, TOT revolutionized the concept by delivering maximum shock through synchronized timing. This philosophical change reflected broader differences between American industrial warfare and Japanese spiritual warfare that would prove decisive throughout the Pacific Campaign. Colonel Hamilton House, directing artillery operations for the 24th Corps on Okinawa, documented the evolution of TOT tactics in his operational reports. The technique had progressed from experimental coordination between two batteries to massive operations involving hundreds of tubes firing across multiple time zones. By April 1945, American artillery units could deliver TOT fires, coordinating naval gunfire from ships hundreds of miles apart, with land-based artillery and close air support, creating destruction on scales that Japanese military science had never contemplated. The Battle of Okinawa provided the ultimate testing ground for American TOT techniques against Japanese human wave tactics. General Mitsuru Ushijima, commanding Japanese forces on the island, had studied the destruction of German forces in Europe and recognized that traditional defensive tactics had become obsolete. His strategy emphasized defense in depth through successive positions, allowing American forces to advance while inflicting maximum casualties through counterattacks. What Ushijima couldn't anticipate was American artillery that could destroy entire defensive zones simultaneously. April 6, 1945, marked the beginning of Operation Kikusui, the largest kamikaze campaign of the Pacific War. While attention focused on suicide aircraft attacking American ships, Japanese ground forces prepared for coordinated human wave attacks designed to overwhelm American positions through sheer weight of numbers. These attacks, carefully timed to coincide with air operations, represented Japanese military doctrine at its most desperate and determined. The first major ground assault began at 0400 hours on April 12th, Easter Sunday. 3 Japanese divisions, approximately 15,000 men, attacked American positions along the Shuri Line in coordinated waves designed to achieve breakthrough through sacrifice and spiritual superiority. American artillery observers, watching through night vision equipment and radar, detected the assembly of Japanese forces hours before the attack began. What followed demonstrated the mathematical precision of American TOT techniques on an unprecedented scale. Fire direction centers coordinating 156 artillery pieces calculated firing sequences that would deliver 1,872 shells within a 45-second window. The bombardment included shells from 105mm howitzers, 155mm guns, 8-inch howitzers, and 240mm mortars, each timed to arrive simultaneously, despite vastly different ballistic characteristics and firing positions. The physical destruction was catastrophic beyond Japanese imagination. Entire companies disappeared in seconds, as precisely timed explosions created overlapping zones of destruction. Traditional human wave tactics depended on momentum and the ability to close with enemy positions before defensive fires could take effect. TOT barrages eliminated the time factor entirely, destroying attacking forces before they could develop momentum. Lieutenant Colonel Yahara Hiromichi, Chief of Staff for Japanese forces on Okinawa, recorded the impossible reality of facing American TOT tactics. Our assault formations are destroyed before they can advance 100 meters. The enemy artillery appears simultaneously across our entire front, as if controlled by a single mind. Our soldiers charge into mathematical precision that eliminates courage as a factor. The industrial requirements for sustained TOT operations on Okinawa staggered Japanese intelligence estimates. American forces expended over 200,000 rounds of artillery ammunition during the first week of operations, more than Japanese forces had available for the entire campaign. Supply ships arrived daily with fresh ammunition loads, enabling continuous TOT fires that Japanese logistics could never support. American ammunition production statistics revealed the industrial foundation that made TOT warfare possible. United States factories produced artillery shells at rates exceeding 1.5 million rounds monthly by 1945. This production volume enabled the massive expenditures required for effective TOT operations while maintaining stockpiles for sustained campaigns. Japanese ammunition production, hampered by strategic bombing and resource shortages, could not approach these levels. The mathematical complexity of coordinating massive TOT fires required computational capabilities that Japanese forces had never developed. American fire direction centers used mechanical calculators, extensive firing tables, and teams of specialists to compute the precise timing required for simultaneous impact. These calculations considered atmospheric conditions, individual weapon characteristics, and target coordinates to achieve accuracy measured in seconds rather than minutes. Weather services supporting American artillery operations provided meteorological data with precision that enabled accurate TOT timing. Balloon-borne instruments measured wind speed and direction at altitudes relevant to shell trajectories. Temperature and humidity readings affected ballistic performance and were incorporated into firing calculations. Japanese forces, lacking comparable meteorological capabilities, could not achieve the precision required for effective counter-battery coordination. The psychological impact of TOT barrages on Japanese forces proved as devastating as their physical effects. Soldiers trained to advance despite casualties found their mental preparation useless when entire units disappeared simultaneously. Traditional Japanese military psychology emphasized spiritual strength over material considerations, but TOT fires eliminated the time needed for spiritual preparation to take effect. Dr. Shigeru Fukudome, a Japanese military psychiatrist who studied combat stress, documented the breakdown of traditional warrior psychology when facing TOT artillery. Soldiers can prepare mentally for death in battle, but not for instantaneous annihilation without warning. The American artillery technique destroys the spiritual foundation of our military culture by eliminating the opportunity for heroic action. Communications networks supporting TOT operations represented technological achievements that Japanese forces could not duplicate. Multiple radio frequencies, telephone lines, and even primitive radar systems connected observers to fire direction centers to artillery batteries across distances of hundreds of miles. This communication infrastructure enabled coordination that was impossible with Japanese equipment and training. The integration of naval gunfire with land-based artillery multiplied the effectiveness of American TOT techniques. Battleships and cruisers positioned offshore could deliver heavy shells with flight times calculated to coordinate with field artillery fires. This sea-land integration created bombardments of unprecedented scale and complexity, involving firing solutions that considered the curvature of the Earth and the rotation of naval guns. Counter-battery operations against American artillery proved futile for Japanese forces due to fundamental limitations in equipment and doctrine. Japanese artillery, designed for precision shooting with limited ammunition, could not achieve the sustained fires necessary to disrupt American TOT operations. When Japanese batteries revealed their positions by firing, they faced immediate destruction from coordinated American responses. The few Japanese artillery pieces that survived American counter-battery fire found themselves unable to coordinate effective responses. Limited communications equipment, inadequate survey data, and restricted ammunition supplies prevented Japanese artillery from achieving the concentration necessary to disrupt American operations. Individual batteries firing independently could not match the mathematical precision of coordinated TOT techniques. Quality control procedures for American TOT ammunition ensured performance standards that Japanese production could not match. Shell weights, powder charges, and fuse timing were standardized to tolerances that enabled precise mathematical calculation of flight times. Japanese ammunition, produced under wartime conditions with limited quality control, exhibited variations that prevented effective coordination even when tactical knowledge existed. The training programs that produced American artillery officers capable of TOT coordination represented educational achievements that Japanese military schools never approached. University-level mathematics courses, engineering training, and extensive practical exercises created officers who understood artillery as applied science. Japanese artillery training, emphasizing traditional gunnery skills and spiritual discipline, produced officers unprepared for mathematical warfare. Specialized equipment developed for TOT operations demonstrated American technological innovation under combat pressure. Improved plotting boards enabled rapid calculation of firing data. Enhanced communication equipment maintained coordination despite enemy interference. Mechanical computers accelerated the mathematical operations required for complex TOT missions. Japanese forces lacked access to comparable equipment regardless of tactical understanding. The scale of destruction achieved through TOT techniques fundamentally altered the tactical landscape of Pacific warfare. Japanese defensive positions that had required days of conventional bombardment to neutralize were destroyed in minutes through coordinated fires. This acceleration of the destruction timeline eliminated Japanese advantages in defensive engineering and spiritual preparation for prolonged resistance. Medical services supporting Japanese forces documented casualties from TOT barrages that differed significantly from conventional artillery wounds. The simultaneous impact of multiple shells created blast effects and secondary fragmentation that exceeded the capacity of field medical units. Traditional Japanese medical doctrine, emphasizing treatment of individual casualties, proved inadequate for the mass casualties produced by TOT fires. The logistical triumph of maintaining TOT capabilities throughout extended campaigns demonstrated American industrial superiority over Japanese forces. Continuous ship convoys delivered ammunition, replacement equipment, and specialized supplies necessary for sustained mathematical warfare. Japanese logistics, disrupted by submarine warfare and air attacks, could not support comparable operations. Forward observers directing TOT fires possessed capabilities that represented the pinnacle of American military technology. Radio equipment provided immediate communication with fire direction centers. Optical instruments enabled target identification at extreme ranges. Specialized training in mathematics and ballistics allowed precise calculation of target coordinates and damage assessment. Japanese observers, limited by equipment shortages and traditional training, could not achieve comparable effectiveness. The development of mobile fire direction centers enabled American forces to maintain TOT capabilities despite tactical movement and enemy action. Truck-mounted equipment provided computational capabilities that could be relocated rapidly to avoid counter-battery fire. Japanese artillery, dependent on fixed installations and limited transportation, could not achieve comparable mobility or survivability. Integration of close air support with TOT fires created combined arms effectiveness that Japanese forces had never experienced. Fighter bombers coordinated their attacks with artillery fires to achieve destruction that exceeded the sum of individual weapon effects. This integration required communication and timing precision that Japanese forces could not duplicate with available equipment and training. The final collapse of Japanese resistance on Okinawa demonstrated the ultimate effectiveness of American TOT techniques against human wave tactics. General Ushijima's last counterattack, involving the remaining 4,000 Japanese soldiers in a desperate assault on American positions, was met with the largest TOT barrage of the Pacific War. 87 artillery batteries delivered 1,044 shells in 30 seconds, obliterating the attack before it could develop. Corporal Masahiko Takahashi, one of fewer than 50 survivors of the final counterattack, provided testimony that captured the hopelessness of facing American mathematical warfare. We charged with the spirit of our ancestors, prepared to die gloriously for the Emperor. The Americans responded with mathematics. Every shell arrived at the same moment, as if the gods themselves had turned against us. There was no honor in such death, only scientific precision. Post-war analysis by Japanese military historians acknowledged that TOT techniques had revolutionized warfare beyond their ability to adapt. The combination of industrial capacity, technological innovation, and mathematical precision had created artillery effectiveness that rendered traditional defensive tactics obsolete. Japanese military culture, emphasizing spiritual strength over material capabilities, had proven inadequate against American applied science. The casualty statistics from engagements involving TOT barrages revealed the lethality of mathematical warfare. Japanese units attacked by TOT fires suffered casualty rates exceeding 90% within the first minute of bombardment. These losses occurred faster than traditional military medical doctrine could address, creating collapse of unit cohesion that prevented tactical recovery. American artillery expenditure during the Okinawa campaign totaled over 2.5 million rounds of all calibers. representing more artillery ammunition than Japanese forces had available for all Pacific operations combined. This expenditure was sustainable due to American production capacity and logistics capabilities that Japanese planners had consistently underestimated throughout the war. The technological foundation supporting TOT operations included innovations that influenced post-war artillery development worldwide. Mechanical computers, advanced communications equipment, and precision manufacturing techniques developed for TOT warfare became standard throughout modern artillery systems. Japanese forces, lacking access to such technology, could not develop equivalent capabilities. Training programs that prepared American artillery crews for TOT operations represented systematic approaches to military education that Japanese forces never achieved. Standardized procedures, extensive practice exercises, and mathematical education created personnel capable of executing complex coordination under combat stress. Japanese training, emphasizing individual excellence and spiritual preparation, proved inadequate for technical warfare. The industrial achievement of supporting continuous TOT operations throughout multiple Pacific campaigns demonstrated American manufacturing capabilities that Japanese war planners had failed to comprehend. Shell production, equipment manufacturing, and logistics support operated at scales that enabled mathematical warfare on an unprecedented level. Quality assurance programs for TOT ammunition ensured performance standards that made precise timing calculations possible. Standardized powder charges, consistent shell weights, and reliable fuse timing created ammunition that performed to mathematical specifications. Japanese production, hampered by resource limitations and quality control problems, could not achieve comparable consistency. The strategic implications of TOT techniques extended beyond individual battles to influence the entire course of Pacific warfare. Japanese defensive strategies based on prolonged resistance through successive positions became obsolete when American artillery could destroy entire defensive zones simultaneously. This tactical revolution accelerated American advances and reduced casualties through superior firepower. The final testament to TOT effectiveness came from Japanese commanders who survived the war and acknowledged the technological superiority they had faced. General Ushijima's final message to Tokyo admitted that American artillery coordination had rendered Japanese defensive doctrine obsolete. The enemy has weaponized mathematics itself. Our spiritual strength cannot overcome their scientific precision. The development of time-on-target techniques represented American military innovation at its most effective, transforming artillery from a weapon of attrition to one of decisive engagement. Japanese forces, unprepared for mathematical warfare, found their traditional tactics obsolete against American applied science. The human wave attacks that had defined Japanese military culture were crushed by the mathematical precision of coordinated fires, proving that in modern warfare, industrial capability and technological innovation could overcome spiritual determination and traditional courage. The legacy of TOT techniques influenced artillery doctrine worldwide, establishing principles of coordination and precision that remain relevant in contemporary warfare. The mathematical revolution that began with American artillery officers calculating firing sequences to the second had transformed the nature of battlefield destruction, creating capabilities that rendered traditional defensive tactics obsolete and established the foundation for modern combined arms operations. The sophistication of American meteorological support for TOT operations represented scientific warfare that Japanese forces could never match. Weather stations established throughout the Pacific provided real-time atmospheric data that enabled precise ballistic calculations. Wind speed measurements at multiple altitudes, temperature gradients, and barometric pressure readings were transmitted to fire direction centers within minutes of collection. This meteorological precision allowed American artillery to achieve accuracy that seemed supernatural to Japanese observers who lacked comparable weather services. Lieutenant Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, one of Japan's most brilliant staff officers, studied captured American artillery manuals, and was stunned by the scientific approach to warfare they revealed. His analysis, written for Imperial General Headquarters in early 1945, captured Japanese bewilderment at American methods. The enemy treats artillery as applied mathematics rather than military art. They have weather specialists, survey teams, and communication networks that reduce warfare to engineering problems. Our spiritual approach cannot compete with their scientific precision. The communication network supporting TOT operations incorporated redundancy systems that Japanese forces had never developed. Primary telephone lines connected fire direction centers to batteries, with radio networks providing backup communications. Signal Corps units maintained these networks despite enemy action, ensuring that TOT fires could be delivered even when individual communication links failed. Japanese communications, vulnerable to American electronic warfare and lacking backup systems, frequently failed during critical operations. Radar technology, still primitive in 1945, began to influence American TOT capabilities during the final months of the Pacific War. Early warning radars could detect Japanese aircraft and coordinate artillery fires with air defense operations. Counter-battery radars located enemy artillery positions and enabled immediate TOT responses. Japanese forces, lacking equivalent radar capabilities, could not achieve comparable situational awareness or coordination. The integration of psychological warfare with TOT operations multiplied their effectiveness beyond pure destructive capability. American intelligence officers studied Japanese military psychology and timed TOT barrages to achieve maximum demoralization. Attacks during traditional meditation periods, coordinated bombardments before planned ceremonies, and precisely timed fires that disrupted Japanese military rituals created psychological damage that complemented physical destruction. Japanese military culture, emphasizing honor and spiritual preparation for death, proved particularly vulnerable to the instantaneous nature of TOT bombardments. Traditional samurai philosophy taught that honorable death required spiritual preparation and conscious acceptance of fate. TOT fires eliminated the time needed for such preparation, creating deaths that Japanese culture considered meaningless rather than heroic. This psychological dimension proved as devastating as the physical casualties. Medical documentation from Japanese field hospitals revealed the unique nature of TOT casualties. Traditional artillery wounds occurred over extended periods, allowing medical personnel to treat casualties in sequence. TOT barrages created mass casualties that overwhelmed medical facilities designed for conventional warfare. Japanese medical doctrine, emphasizing individual treatment and spiritual comfort for the dying, proved inadequate for the scale of destruction created by mathematical warfare. The industrial achievements supporting continuous TOT operations included manufacturing innovations that Japanese industry could not duplicate. Precision machining of artillery components, quality control systems for ammunition production, and standardized manufacturing processes created weapon systems that performed to mathematical specifications. Japanese industry, damaged by strategic bombing and lacking advanced machine tools, could not achieve comparable precision or consistency. Training facilities for American artillery personnel represented educational achievements that Japanese military schools never approached. The artillery school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, developed curricula that included university-level mathematics, engineering principles, and extensive practical exercises in ballistic computation. Graduates understood artillery as applied science rather than traditional gunnery, enabling the mathematical precision required for effective TOT operations. The systematic approach to artillery employment reflected broader differences between American and Japanese military culture. American doctrine emphasized standardization, detailed planning, and systematic execution. Japanese military culture valued individual initiative, spiritual preparation, and adaptation to circumstances. These philosophical differences proved decisive when mathematical precision became more important than traditional military virtues. Counterintelligence operations protected American TOT capabilities from Japanese infiltration attempts. Security measures ensured that firing procedures, communication codes, and technical specifications remained secret despite Japanese espionage efforts. Code-breaking operations provided intelligence about Japanese defensive preparations, enabling TOT fires to be targeted with precision that seemed supernatural to defenders who believed their positions were secret. The electronic warfare capabilities supporting American TOT operations included radio direction finding equipment that located Japanese communication centers and command posts. These facilities became priority targets for TOT fires, disrupting Japanese coordination and preventing effective responses to American artillery attacks. Japanese forces, lacking equivalent electronic warfare capabilities, could not locate or disrupt American fire direction centers. Research and development programs continuously improved American TOT capabilities throughout the Pacific War. University laboratories developed improved fusing systems, enhanced communication equipment, and more precise survey instruments. This scientific approach to military technology created continuous innovation that Japanese research efforts could not match due to resource limitations and organizational problems. The logistical triumph of supporting TOT operations across the vast Pacific theater demonstrated American organizational capabilities that Japanese planners had never anticipated. Supply ships delivered ammunition, equipment, and personnel to artillery units scattered across thousands of miles of ocean. This logistical achievement enabled mathematical warfare on scales that Japanese military doctrine had never contemplated. Statistical analysis of TOT effectiveness provided mathematical proof of American artillery superiority. Combat after-action reports documented casualty rates, ammunition expenditure, and target destruction that exceeded theoretical calculations. These statistics validated the mathematical approach to warfare and provided data for continuous improvement of TOT techniques. The engineering achievement of coordinating naval gunfire with land-based artillery represented technological innovation under combat pressure. Ballistic calculations had to account for ship movement, earth curvature, and atmospheric conditions affecting projectiles traveling hundreds of miles. Japanese forces, lacking the survey capabilities and communication equipment necessary for such coordination, could not achieve comparable integration of fire support. Quality control procedures for TOT ammunition included testing protocols that ensured performance to mathematical specifications. Each lot of ammunition was test-fired to verify ballistic consistency, with statistical analysis identifying variations that could affect TOT timing. Japanese ammunition production, limited by resource shortages and quality control problems, exhibited variations that prevented effective coordination even when tactical knowledge existed. The mobility of American fire direction centers enabled continuous TOT capabilities, despite tactical movement and enemy action. Truck-mounted equipment provided computational capabilities that could be relocated rapidly to avoid counter-battery fire. Communications equipment maintained contact with widely dispersed batteries regardless of geographic obstacles. Japanese artillery, dependent on fixed installations and limited communications, could not achieve comparable flexibility. Advanced survey techniques established coordinate systems with precision that enabled accurate TOT timing across vast areas. Triangulation methods, optical instruments, and mathematical calculations created firing charts accurate to meters across entire battle zones. Japanese survey capabilities, limited by equipment shortages and traditional techniques, could not achieve the precision required for effective artillery coordination. The scientific approach to ammunition storage and handling ensured that TOT fires could be sustained despite the massive expenditure rates required for mathematical warfare. Climate-controlled storage facilities protected ammunition from tropical conditions that could affect ballistic performance. Inventory systems tracked ammunition lots and ensured that compatible rounds were used for coordinated fires. Japanese ammunition handling, limited by facilities and equipment, could not maintain the consistency required for precise timing. Integration of close air support with TOT fires created combined arms effectiveness that multiplied destruction beyond the sum of individual weapons. Fighter bombers coordinated their attacks with artillery fires, using communication systems and timing procedures that Japanese forces could not duplicate. This integration required training and equipment that represented the pinnacle of American military technology. The development of specialized ammunition for TOT operations included fusing systems that provided consistent burst patterns and timing. Variable time fuses enabled airburst effects that maximized casualties against personnel targets. Delayed fuses allowed penetration of Japanese fortifications before detonation. Japanese ammunition, limited to basic types and inconsistent fusing, could not achieve comparable effects even when available in sufficient quantities. Forward air controllers directing both airstrikes and artillery fires possessed communication capabilities that represented technological achievements Japanese forces could not match. Multi-frequency radio equipment enabled simultaneous coordination with aircraft and artillery batteries. Specialized training in both air and ground operations created personnel capable of integrating combined arms effects with mathematical precision. The final demonstration of TOT effectiveness came during the preparation for Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. Artillery preparations included TOT fires, coordinating over 400 batteries positioned throughout the Pacific. These bombardments would have created destruction on scales that Japanese military planners recognized as unsurvivable. The atomic bombs that ended the war prevented this ultimate demonstration of mathematical warfare, but planning documents revealed the scope of destruction that American TOT capabilities could have achieved. Emperor Hirohito's surrender decision was influenced by reports describing American artillery capabilities that Japanese forces could not counter. Military advisors acknowledged that TOT techniques had rendered traditional defensive strategies obsolete. The mathematical precision of American warfare had proved superior to Japanese spiritual determination, forcing acknowledgement that continued resistance was futile. Post-war interrogation of Japanese officers revealed the extent to which TOT techniques had demoralized enemy forces. Veterans who had survived conventional bombardments described feelings of helplessness when facing artillery that allowed no time for defensive action. The mathematical revolution in warfare had transformed not just tactical capabilities, but the psychological landscape of modern combat. The technological foundation established for TOT operations influenced post-war artillery development throughout the world. Coordination techniques, communication systems, and precision manufacturing methods developed for mathematical warfare became standard in modern artillery systems. The revolution that began with American artillery officers calculating firing times to the second had established principles that remain relevant in contemporary military operations. Training programs developed for TOT operations created educational standards that influenced military schools worldwide. The systematic approach to artillery education, emphasizing mathematics and engineering over traditional gunnery skills, became the foundation for modern artillery training. Japanese military education, reformed after the war, adopted many American methods that had proved superior to traditional approaches. The industrial capacity that supported TOT operations throughout the Pacific War demonstrated American manufacturing capabilities that established the foundation for post-war economic dominance. Factories that produced artillery ammunition adapted their precision manufacturing techniques to civilian production, creating industrial capabilities that influenced global economic development for decades. The mathematical revolution represented by TOT techniques proved that scientific precision could overcome traditional military virtues when applied with sufficient resources and organizational capability. Japanese human wave attacks representing centuries of warrior tradition and spiritual preparation, were obliterated by American artillery officers armed with slide rules, stopwatches, and unlimited ammunition. The age of mathematical warfare had begun, and its lessons would influence military thinking for generations to come.